Prologue. What America Gave the World Twice. Father. Thomas Keating, the Trappist who taught a generation of Americans to sit in silence, looked at the church basements of this country, the folding chairs, the bad coffee, the laminated slogans, and made a judgment that still startles. Alcoholics Anonymous is a spiritual tradition, one with its own wisdom literature, worthy of the name alongside the traditions of the desert and the cloister. He did not say it as a courtesy. He said it as a monk who had spent 60 years inside the older traditions and recognized, in the rooms, the same anatomy of surrender. If you have ever sat in one of those rooms, or ever loved someone who has, or ever wondered whether some version of that chair might one day have your name on it, this book is addressed to you. And if you are quite sure none of that applies to you, I ask only that you withhold the verdict for a chapter or so. The tradition Keating honored has a way of widening its address. It is often said that the 12 Steps are America's distinctive contribution to the world's spirituality. What is less often noticed is that America made its distinctive contribution to the world's philosophy in the same key, and almost from the same soil. The philosophy was pragmatism, Pierce's and James's insistence that the meaning of an idea is found in the difference it makes, that a tree is known by its fruit and a belief by what it does to the one who holds it. The spirituality arrived a generation later through a failed stockbroker in a hospital bed, and the lineage between them is not a metaphor, it is documented, person to person. Roland H., a wealthy American drunk given up as hopeless, sat in Zurich with Carl Jung, who told him that only a vital spiritual experience could rearrange a man at the depth his condition required. Roland carried that sentence to Ebby T. Ebby carried it to his old drinking friend Bill Wilson, and Bill, drying out at Towns Hospital in the winter of 1934, was handed a copy of William James's The Varieties of Religious Experience and read it, by his own account, cover to cover in a day. The steps that emerged were James's psychology of conversion turned into a program of action, fruits over roots, tested one day at a time. When the rooms say it works if you work it, they are reciting, in the vernacular, the pragmatic maxim itself. This is worth saying at the outset because this book will occasionally lean on that same American philosophical tradition. Quietly, in the notes, never is a requirement, and it seemed only fair to tell you that the steps got there first. And between the philosophy and the spirituality stands a third American gift, and this book cannot tell its story without him. Walker Percy, physician, novelist, Louisiana Catholic, and by his own cheerful confession a thief of Pierce, took the pragmatist's account of signs and turned it into a diagnosis of the modern soul. In essays and in novels, the two forms this tradition loves best, he showed the self as a castaway, a creature lost precisely amid its abundance, unable to get a clear signal on itself, waiting on the beach for news from across the sea. He even subtitled his strangest and funniest book The Last Self-Help Book, a joke with a razor in it, and a bow this manual hereby returns, since a book for the rooms is nothing if not a book for castaways. The author owes Percy a debt with faces on it. It was a shared love of Percy's novels that kindled his friendship with Brian McLaren, whose Seasons of Faith will companion this book from its third chapter on. And Brian once told me, in a conversation I am reaching back across a long friendship and a longer memory to retrieve, that as a young graduate student he sat with Percy himself, interviewing the doctor for his master's thesis. I tell it as I remember it, which is how everything in this lineage has ever been told, hand to hand, imperfectly remembered, reliably alive. And every Advent for many years the author had walked out from a monastery retreat in the Louisiana pines to stand at Percy's grave. But that is the end of this book, not its beginning, and it will keep. Years afterward, Bill Wilson wrote to Jung, and Jung's reply gave the whole matter its epigraph. The craving for alcohol, Jung wrote, was a low-grade form of the soul's own thirst, the spiritual thirst of our being for wholeness, and he closed with a Latin play on words that this book will spend 12 chapters unpacking: spiritus contra spiritum. Spirit against spirits. The same word for the highest presence and the bottled counterfeit. Jung was not being clever. He was stating, in 4 words, the exact structure of the human predicament: that our deepest desire and our deepest destruction draw on one and the same thirst, and everything depends on where the thirst is aimed. This book stands in a lineage it is glad to name. Richard Rohr's Breathing Underwater taught a generation, the author included, to read the steps and the gospel as one text, and its fingerprints are on every chapter that follows. Nearer still, and earlier, Philip St. Romain's Becoming a New Person, written out of his years in chemical dependency ministry, walked the steps as a path of Christian growth for any reader willing to admit they needed one, and it did so back when the idea was still strange. I should tell you plainly that Saint Romain is the oldest friend of my life, and that whatever is sound in this book's pastoral instincts has been marinating in that friendship for half a century. You deserve to know when an author's citations are also his debts. And 2 more names, whose voices you will hear so often that they are less sources than company. Gerald May, the psychiatrist of grace, who examined addiction clinically and concluded that its machinery is installed in everyone. That attachment, the nailing of desire to objects, makes idolaters of us all, and who nevertheless wrote about our condition with a tenderness that never once curdled into shame. The longing itself is the best thing in us, he insisted. We are to embrace our incompleteness, to be overwhelmed, as he put it, by the beauty of our need. And James Finley, Merton's novice and a clinical psychologist of trauma, who has spent decades sitting with people whose wounds and whose addictions arrived tangled together, teaching them that the love of God protects us from nothing, even as it sustains us in all things. If you have kept company with Finley's teaching, you will recognize the water this book swims in. If you have not, no matter, the book will teach you to float as it goes. A word about the word you. This book is written to you, not about addicts, to be read over their shoulders, but to you, whoever you are. It can risk that address because of what Keating and May both saw, that the difference between the reader with a chip in her pocket and the reader who has never missed a day of work is a difference of degree and disguise, not of kind. Keating's name for the universal version was the false self and its emotional programs for happiness, the installed cravings for security, esteem, and control that run in every human being like software that boots before we wake. May's name for it was attachment, and his verdict was the one already quoted: idolaters, all of us. The addict in the rooms differs from the rest of us chiefly in this, that her particular idol collapsed on top of her, publicly and mercifully, before respectability could finish soundproofing the shrine. She has been deprived of the illusion, which is the severe grace this whole tradition is built on. So when this book says you, it means you. But it will say it the way Merton said it, conditionally, as an invitation to recognition rather than an accusation. If you have ever. If you have never, read on anyway. The chapter about you is coming.